Welcome, nature detectives. I'm Conrad Baker. I'm an outdoor educator with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation at Letchworth State Park, and today I have a nature mystery for you. Today, I'm in a bright, beautiful, well-mowed, well-maintained lawn. Looks like there's just grass growing here. It's a grassy field. But looking more closely, we can see that it's actually a field of tiny wildflowers. Little wildflowers that you might have seen before in your neighborhood. I'll show you one up close. Right here. Have you seen a flower that looks like that before? It's a pretty modest flower, not very loud, not with very bright colors that catch our eyes, but they are really important. They do a lot of jobs that help us humans. One of the first nature clues that a lot of people notice, and I notice right away whenever I see these flowers, are their shape. It's a really kind of a unique, interesting shape. Really smooth stem with no leaves coming up to this big firework of tiny little flowerlets. Looking really closely at this flower, we see that it's made up of tiny little mini flowers, all clustered together in that nice ball shape. The second nature clue that we notice about all those little flowerlets are their color. They're, like we said, not very loud, not very eye-catching, but they're a really interesting kind of off-white ivory color. You know, not quite bright, shocking white, but not quite tan or cream colored. Some folks might call it an off-white or an ivory. The third nature clue that we can notice if we look really carefully are the leaves that might be growing right next to the flower. They might look something like this. A small cluster of 3 leaves together, and each little leaf is almost perfectly round. They don't have a lot of spines or hairs or bends or scoops taken out of them. They're almost a perfect circle. Let's put all our nature clues together. We have a plant with a little cluster of 3 leaves. Each leaf is almost a perfect circle. The flower stands up on a leafless stalk and bursts into a big firework of tiny little flowers. And those tiny little flowers are pretty modestly colored. They're kind of an off-white, sort of an ivory color. This must be clover. Now, clover is a super common plant that we might see around here. There are lots of different kinds of clovers, many different species, and there are also a lot of other plants that look just like it. But we can tell the difference from the shapes of the leaves. For example, holding this clover in one hand, I'll show you another plant that looks just like it, like this guy over here. If we look really closely at this other plant, it's a hot, really warm day, so it's all crumpled up into a tiny little ball. But looking really closely, we notice that the end of this cluster of leaves has a heart shape. If you notice, the end of the leaf is all pointed in on the end, like a little V. Unlike the clover, which is roundish, this leaf has a little divot on the end, like a little V, a little notch. And that tells us that this other kind of plant is a similar, but not quite the same plant that a scientist would call wood sorrel. Wood sorrel that tends to live, as you might have guessed, more in the woods. It so happens that I found the wood sorrel just a little bit into the woods over my shoulder, and I found the clover right where I'm sitting right now. Now, clovers are a super important plant. They do a lot of jobs for us humans. They are a nitrogen fixing plant. So there is nitrogen as part of the air all the time, but most plants can't make good use of that nitrogen to help them grow and be healthy. Clovers are a kind of a plant that can take nitrogen from the air and fix it into a usable state in the soil for other kinds of plants to use, including plants that we like to eat, like corn and soybeans and all different kinds of really popular crops across all of New York State. Clovers, while they're doing that, while they're growing and being happy, they spread out those nice wide leaves and they shade the ground just a little, like less than an inch. They create a little bit of shade, like a tiny little umbrella. And that's just enough to prevent a lot of more aggressive plants, weedier, more troublesome plants from taking root and taking off and taking over this whole lawn or a whole farm field or someone's whole garden. In that way, clovers are like what a farmer would call a cover crop. It's not a crop or a plant that we like to eat particularly, but it helps to protect and benefit lots of plants that we do like to eat. Clovers are a really popular plant to use as cover crops by farmers, and they're kind of coming back among homeowners for a lawn plant. And they're kind of coming around for city planners as a nice plant to have in city parks and public spaces. Thank you so much for joining me for today's Nature Mystery. If you have any questions about clovers or other related plants, please pop a comment in the comment section below the video. Share this video with your friends to put their nature detective skills to the test. And as always, like Letchworth State Park's Facebook page to stay tuned for more nature mysteries.